I am beyond excited to welcome to the Marketing Mavens Podcast Daniel Bogdanoff, Director of Product and Content Marketing at Keysight. Dan earned his BSEE from Texas A&M and then started his career journey in the test and measurement space with Agilent. He gained experience in sales and marketing engineering roles before making the move to Keysight in 2014. So if you're doing the math in your head, he hit his 10-year anniversary milestone at Keysight this year in April. Congrats, Dan.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm very excited to be here.
At Keysight, he's held multiple roles in business development and product management, but then he made a phase shift by venturing into marketing and content strategy. That's how I've come to know Dan and be exposed to his work. If you've been paying any attention to Keysight's marketing in the past 3 to 4 years, you've probably seen his educational content on the Keysight Labs YouTube channel. Dan's engaging videos bring electrical test topics to life. He's got a fun style. It's a little bit like Mythbusters crossed with Veritasium, but it's his personality that really makes it unique and interesting. So Dan, I'm pumped you're joining us. Really appreciate you being here. So let's get into it. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, let's do it.
I love starting with this question because it really surfaces some interesting stories. What's your earliest memory of marketing making an impact on your life?
Oh gosh, this is a good one. I think I really had to think because you sent this question ahead of time, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't have an answer for this because I think good marketing is something that you don't necessarily recognize as marketing. But I was remembering as a boy, I saw this commercial for this remote control car that had big tires. So you could go in one direction and then switch directions and it would flip over and it would function on both sides. I don't remember what it was called, but I remember seeing that commercial and going, oh yeah, I want one of those. And sure enough, for Christmas, I got one. So I suppose marketing works in this case.
And it's funny you bring that up. It's a little walk down memory lane because we're probably thinking of the same remote control car toy that worked both right side up, upside down, could go up a wall, do a backflip.
The curb, the works, yeah.
Dan, can you walk us through your career journey so far and kind of focus on highlighting any of the key decisions and relationships that ultimately led you to your current role at Keysight?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. Not in a when a lot of people say interesting, they mean like it's been rocky. And I think for me, it's been interesting in that it's been very surprising. I got an electrical engineering degree from A&M, like you mentioned, and I didn't necessarily want to be doing R&D work, in a cubicle working on the same problem for 4 to 6 months. I didn't know what else there was, but I knew there had to be more than that sort of job role, which academia likes to really push. And I knew I liked the electrical engineering things I was learning. The concepts were interesting. It's this whole world of beneath our realm of vision where just everything around us operates, but it's all a little bit magical and a little bit mathematical. So that's always been very attractive to me. And I found a job requisition posting at Agilent, and I was like, I don't know who Agilent is, but the job title was technical marketing engineer. I was like, that sounds like not R&D and not sales, because I was trying to kind of avoid sales a bit because I didn't realize how good those people have it sometimes and how much fun they get to have working with customers. So I saw this technical marketing engineering role and I was like, I'm going to apply for that, see what happens. Got through a couple rounds of interviews, and it turns out, Agilent is electronic test and measurement that was formerly Hewlett Packard. So HP started in 1939 doing a RF signal source for Disney so that Fantasia theaters could test their sound systems properly. So the core of Hewlett Packard is this test and measurement group. And when they started doing computers and printers, they're like, we got to split this up so investors know what to do. So Agilent was that core test and measurement group. And later we spun off again into Keysight, split into Agilent now does life sciences and Keysight does test and measurement. But for me personally, I applied for that Agilent job. They flew me out here to Colorado Springs, where I am now, and I was from Texas, and I was like, this is great. These people are so smart. It's such an interesting blend of personal skills, written skills, messaging skills, but also technical ability, because everyone who wants to buy an oscilloscope, which was the oscilloscopes division, anyone who wants to buy an oscilloscope is an engineer. So you have to be able to speak to them, speak their language, and understand the problems that they're trying to solve. So I felt like I crushed the interview. It was like a full 8-hour interview in classic HP style. Flew home and told my new wife, like, hey, that was it. That's the place I'm supposed to be. And I got a call later, like, sorry, you didn't get the job. It's like, I really thought that was it. But like, hey, there's another job that if you're interested, there's another group hiring. We'll bring you back out, do another interview. So again, hopped on a plane, full day interview in Colorado Springs, flew back. It's like, that was it. I crushed it again. And I get a call, Daniel, you didn't get the job. I was like, what's going on? Because I really felt like that was kind of where I was supposed to be. And I really liked the people and the work and the product. And they said, you didn't get the job, but we do have a contractor position open. If you want to come out to Colorado, try it out, see how it goes. Contractor positions can come and go, but we really liked you. The other team liked you. Like, come try it out. So we did that. And then 6 months later, a job opened up in technical support for oscilloscopes. And they're like, hey, you should go apply for that. So I did and got a real job, a non-contractor job doing that. And I spent 6 months to a year in that role, really getting to know oscilloscopes super duper well. Like all the weird corner cases and bugs and, not quirks, but just the finesse of using oscilloscope. I really got to sink my teeth into that, working alongside the people who actually built these things. So I got to just kind of just ooze technical knowledge into my brain in that role. And then as time went on, I took some business development roles. I kind of got tapped for those. I was a product manager for some oscilloscopes for a while. And at one point, they said, Daniel, we have this new scope coming out. It's to a low cost. It's like a lower cost scope. It's to kind of an education, higher volume market. And we want to figure out how to reach these people. And I looked at our sales teams who did a really good job reaching these kind of tier 1 universities, like engineering at MIT or Stanford, those sort of folks. But we had a harder time, and our sales teams didn't reach as well the kind of not as well funded engineering programs. So I thought, hey, video is a great way to reach people kind of en masse. How hard could it be? And I found out how hard it was. But I started doing video, and that kind of became a thing for a while. We did a lot of virtual program design. So I think video is a good tool, and maybe we'll get into this in a little bit. Video by itself is great, but it's not necessarily impactful for the business. So being able to build programs that allow you to build audiences, build trust, and build kind of that like know, like, trust factor where people start to know you, like you, and trust what you have to say. And video is a great way to build that. So we built programs for that. And that's kind of where I've been, kind of in this, programs, content marketing, a bit of product marketing, kind of whatever pops up I like to handle, because I've done a bit of everything here.
We could delve into what it takes to be persistent coming out of college for that first critical role in many cases, right? That's a conversation in of itself that I think could help a lot of new college grads, but we'll revisit. I love that you started to delve into the origin story of video. And yes, we will get into that. But before we do, I want to pause on something that is underlying in your experience that I think a lot of people would be surprised to know about you. So you were actually a whitewater rafting guide over summers during college.
I was.
How did that experience impact your ability to capture the attention of an audience?
Yeah. I loved that job as a summer job for college, where I'd be in the lab and in front of a screen for most of the year, and then summer would hit and I'd get to go like play on the rivers. But I picked up some things that were surprisingly useful and helpful, and some skills that I got to kind of refine and hone that have really helped me a lot today. And one of the things about being a river guide is it's a lot of teamwork, and we're all trying to achieve the same goal. And I think corporate America and businesses it's a team sport. there's not necessarily always an opposing team, but the better we can work together as teams, the more effective we are and the happier everyone is, and the better the business does. I also learned a lot about how to speak and teach important things, like life-saving things, to groups of people in an environment that they weren't necessarily expecting to have to learn these things. So a lot of this, like storytelling and messaging and twists in a story are things that I use in content today. I refined a lot of those skills doing like a safety talk to a group of 30 or 50 or 100 rafting, customers who are there to raft for the day. It's like, here's how to stay alive on the river. And that sort of public speaking storytelling was something was a surprising thing that I picked up and has been really, really helpful to this day.
That's a really good point to sort of pivot off of and discuss marketing in the semiconductor and electrical engineering industry at large, because I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I believe many people view marketing in our sector as very dry, right? It deals with deeply technical subject matter. What's your view on that?
I think there is a lot of deeply technical subject matter, and there's a time and a place to really get into it, and almost on a college course level. But that, in my opinion, shouldn't be the only type of communication and teaching that we do. I really believe that our customers want to be better at their jobs. They want to do things more efficiently, maybe cheaper, maybe faster, but really they just want to do it better, whatever better looks like for them. And a lot of how I view the job of marketing in our industry is, how do we match what we think the value of our products or our chips are with the value that the customer thinks they're going to get out of it? So how do we bridge the gap between, oh, my speeds are faster, to, oh, I'm going to design this thing better or more efficiently? So taking that ultimately for me is how I view marketing, where sometimes that's a 2-day seminar at a trade show. Sometimes it's a 10-minute video on one little feature thing. And sometimes it's a conversation like this that helps us all kind of reframe how we think about the industry and think about our jobs overall.
Yeah, some interesting points and examples that you offered there. Let's expand that a little bit. Are you seeing any particular trends taking shape in marketing in the semiconductor and more broadly, the electrical engineering industries that have caught your attention?
I think it's hard to ignore video, and video is kind of a catch-all term, but I think it's hard to ignore having a solid video strategy. So I see more and more people and companies bringing in full-time video professionals just because the demand is so high. We brought in our first kind of full-time marketing video professional, I think in 2015 or 2016, after we'd kind of proved out the concept of, hey, this is effective and useful. But also coming in with good strategy of you can't just do short form and you can't just do long form. Webinars can be very dry. They can get 20 people. They could get 2,000 people depending on how you promote it. So this kind of comes back to having a good core video, I think, is really important, but also building a program, and we call it like the kit around this video. How's it going to market? How are people finding it? Who's promoting it? Are we talking about the right things? Are we building a series out of this? Is it a one-off? These types of conversations all play into what I think is super important today, and getting more and more important, is a solid video strategy.
That's a really important insight, Dan. I'm glad you expanded on that, because it sounds to me like it's not just having video as part of the mix. It's treating video like its own platform and making sure that the strategy that wraps around it coincides with how you use that medium, right? Whether it's going to be edutainment, webinar, or some form of more direct customer facing. And I think that this helps us step into the next question too, because Keysight's had a solid history of creating education-oriented and product videos for the engineering community, yet you've really raised the bar, you and your team. You all create amazing content. Tell us how you got involved with that initially, and can you kind of walk us through how you started to ideate those original ideas?
Yeah, so it started, like I mentioned earlier, where I had the education market and I was trying to communicate to them. And from there, we kind of built out what are the types of things that these sorts of people struggle with? What are things the TAs struggle with, the students and the professors? And in this case, one of the things that a gap we identified out there was there's not a great like oscilloscope tutorial series. So we built out we called it the 2-minute guru series, where all the videos had to be, in that 2-minute window. And we picked essential, just kind of 101 topics for oscilloscopes, but got to play on my support time and my product management experience, knowing kind of these weird gotchas. So you can kind of do some fun storytelling there. But it started with a manager who kind of essentially took a bet on me. I was like, hey, I think we can do this. I need a camera. I found this old locked room in the Colorado Springs site here that had some old halogen studio lights that were not great, but they were lights. So we got this little Canon 70D and a little microphone, and I would sit there with the scripts on my lap alone. And this was basically over Christmas breaks. Like everything else was shut down. I got special permission to work because I didn't have many vacation days at the time. And was just in the studio in December with the script on my lap, and I would do a line and then be like, okay, what's the next line? And just work through it that way. And because I had the script, I could kind of figure out how to do a basic edit. And my philosophy on this is every time we can do these things a little bit better. We were talking before you hit record, like even with the podcast, I think every episode is an opportunity to improve something and to learn something. And videos so much that way. It's not going to start great. Just like anything you start, you're probably going to be bad at it first, but that means you have so much room to grow. So being okay with some, it's not almost ever going to look the way you want it to look, but being able to like iterate and stick with it and progress. And in my case, I had a manager who believed in me and believed in, that approach, and was able to help support that and give me the air cover I needed to, I think, get my feet under me enough where I was like, okay, we're somewhat competent at this now, and we can start kind of doing more of the fun stuff with it.
I love hearing that story, Dan, and how your manager took that chance on you. And, then you walked us through how those humble beginnings gave way to the work you and your team are doing now. What unexpected insights have you learned through creating these videos over the last, 4 or 5 years, give or take, that would surprise other marketers to learn about?
I think that there's a funny question that I've heard some YouTube creators ask other creators, and I'll this will circle back around, I promise. And they'll ask people like, what is 0 to you? So if you publish a video and it gets, what number of views is effectively feels like 0? So if you ask that to someone who does a couple million views per video, their answer is like, oh, if 200,000 people saw this video, no one saw it. For me, my personal answer is like, if I publish a video on YouTube and it's like, 1 or 3K views on it, to me, it's like, oh, I didn't reach it. But what's surprising to me, and I think surprising to other marketers, is so much of video in our industry is about reaching the right people and not doing these big, banner vanity metrics. So reaching 100 of the right people with video and you do that over and over, you'll start going to trade shows and people will be like, oh, you're the one with the pod, you got the Marketing Mavens podcast. Like, you're that guy. This is great. And like the branding and the brand equity you can build with video, even if the banner vanity metrics are not that high, the brand equity you can build is very significant.
It's important that you brought that up, because I think many marketers and leaders can get their attention pulled into that ever increasing kind of up into the right metrics pursuit. But I believe you're spot on with making the impact. Better to impact 100 people deeply than 10,000 people superficially.
Yes.
And I think that this is a great segue into another question too, because as marketers, we're really accountable for driving our company's goals. What goals did Keysight have when you first started into video creation, and how have those goals evolved over time?
Yeah, we've done a lot of designing our programs and designing our content to kind of match what the business goals are. I'm going to say flavor of the month. We always try to think full funnel, but when you evaluate your funnel, from awareness to purchase, there's often weak points. So one of the things that me and my team did was we would talk to our leaders and say, where are the weak points in our funnel? And how can we build a program to help address that specific weak point? So sometimes it was we want more names in our database. It's like, okay, we'll do a giveaway component. We'll do a big influencer outreach program. We'll make the barrier to entry really low and the value they get out of it really high. And sometimes it's like, well, we're really trying to focus in on this industry and these core customers. For example, I did a tour of UL's automotive, like electric vehicle testing lab. And it's like, okay, we want to, we care about automotive. We have great products for automotive. So let's highlight that and speak to those customers. So we eschewed a lot of our normal, awareness tactics and just focused in on like, here's hyper relevant things for these customers. We built content around it. We built partnered, promotional programs and email campaigns and sales initiatives just for those customers. And that sort of muscle and that activity looks very different than what we do for like an awareness activity.
And I feel that you really raised an important insight by where's the weak point in the funnel and how can we as marketers help to solve that, close it down, speed it up.
Building on that, I think what a lot of people see is just the video or just the podcast, and they don't necessarily see the scaffolding of the program that holds that video up. It's kind of the pearl inside of this bigger oyster, but you want to eat the oyster, not the pearl. So there's a lot of stuff that happens that's not quite as like flashy as video, but is critically important.
Yeah, the why behind why marketers do things isn't always the most exciting, but it's relevant for us in the industry. So no, this is a really good one to pivot off of. Also, we all like a good success story as marketers. Do you want to indulge us in talking about one of your most successful marketing activations so far?
I do. I have a lot of times and programs that I look back very fondly on. So early on in the video journey, we ran this program we called Scope Month. And it was kind of a moonshot program. It's like we don't have any like new revs of these oscilloscopes coming out anytime soon. And obviously since then we have had that. But it's like we need to do something different because we feel like we have a superior product, but we maybe don't have the market share we think it should have. So let's do like an awareness sort of program just to kind of get our name out there. And historically, Keysight was not the leader in oscilloscopes that we are today. And we did some influencer marketing. So we reached out to some of the big YouTube EE folks and we're like, hey, we're trying to do this thing. Like we're doing a big giveaway. We'll see what happens. We gave away a 1 gigahertz oscilloscope every day in the month of March, which is like a $10,000 or $15,000 box. It was a very nice scope. So a killer offer, and we thought, okay, we have a good offer, we have good messaging around it, we have a good platform for it. How do we get the word out? And we went to influencers and our own databases and our sales and all that. But the first day, one of our influencer promotion videos went live. And we were just sitting there in someone's cubicle, refreshing the page and watching our number like tick up 100 registrations every minute or two. And at that moment, it's like we just hit some like sometimes you get lucky. Like the idea of success as preparation meets luck. Like we were prepared, but we also had some luck, and it was like, wow, this thing we got. I think tens of thousands of people signed up for this thing. And this was so early in our video career, we didn't really even know how to do live streams. So we're like, okay, we should start doing videos for these people because we had people showing up every day to see the drawing for the scope. And one of our marketing folks was like, well, if we're getting these people showing up every day, we should also like teach them some stuff. I was like, oh yeah, good idea. So we would, in the morning, we'd release a video and then I would write the next one in that AM, film it and edit it in that afternoon so that I was ready for the next morning. And we did that every day for a month. And this is comes back to that iteration makes you better. Like that was a crucible for learning how to write a good intro hook, learning how to integrate messaging with interesting educational content. And to me, that's one of the things I look most fondly on, where I think that kind of ultimately sparked the video career for me, was that combination of preparation, success, and maybe being just stupid enough to think we could pull it off.
That's a great retelling of a success story, and thank you for that. I learned a couple of things by you sharing about it. Hey, we can all recognize lightning in a bottle, but it's a lot harder to appreciate kind of if you're making a cake, how the cake is made, what's the ingredients, the recipe. Talk with us a little bit about that. How do you continually come up with such a diverse range of topics to cover in your content? And I think even further, how do you uncover the things that your audience cares to know and learn about?
Good questions. I'm gonna take that in two parts. So, idea generation is a real struggle for anyone who does content, especially narrative content and even educational content. It's like, what's the next thing? Everyone kind of has some low-hanging fruit they'll start with, and then it's like, okay, now we got to reach higher up on the tree and start finding these things. You'll see me here at my desk or in the Colorado Springs studio doing video, but all my ideas almost universally are like, I'm out on a mountain bike trail, or I'm, in the shower, and everything has gone back of mind, and then an idea just kind of hits. So I'll do a lot of thinking and kind of researching a concept. So like, okay, we want to go after this type of thing. We want to go after automotive. We want to do, I don't know, like voltage ripple, something like that. And I'll learn as much as I can about that, as much as is reasonable. And then I'll walk away from it for a minute and kind of let my brain distill into ideas. And then once I think I have an idea, I try to bounce it off of other people who are also in the space and say, hey, what do you think about this title? What do you think about this concept? And I'll also check it with our technical experts, be like, does this flow make sense? Does this outline make sense? Am I missing anything important? Are there any surprises in here? And kind of that's where my ideas tend to come from. And then figuring out what the audience cares about and wants to know. Sometimes sometimes you just hope, but a lot of times, as kind of a double E nerd and geek myself, I use myself as a test case, and I have some trusted advisor type folks that are in the industry, and I can say, hey, what do you think of this? Like, if I lob this idea at you, what's your response to it? And kind of try to feel it out that way. I'll also look at things like web traffic and Google searches, and what sort of content pieces are being downloaded and consumed by me and by competitors or other people in the space. Like, oh, that video did well, but I think I could put my own flavor on it. So how do I take that idea and that concept, which we know resonates with this audience, but make it our own, do it in our own voice with our own, product and value propositions?
There's some rich insights for marketers that you just shared in that segment, Dan, and we'll definitely be pulling that one out for a closer look. One of the key things that I anchored to was get outside and do something that fulfills you, that you enjoy. I can relate. A lot of the ideas that I come up with are on a run. Yeah. And I love that you have a sounding board, trusted advisors that you actually ping pong those ideas off of, because that can be the difference between something that seems good in theory and may not fly in reality.
Yeah, and there's this thing I've found, especially working with other creators who are newer into creating content, but I feel this deeply in myself, is I like to say, nobody likes to be edited. Nobody likes to have an idea that they think is great and have someone say, yeah, that's good, but what if? And that being able to listen to other people and not, the kill your darlings concept of, I think this is the perfect idea. It's like, no, listening to the what ifs and having a set of people that you trust to give effective feedback, and they've proven over time, like, some feedback you should ignore and other feedback you should listen to, and learning when and how to listen to feedback and also provide that feedback to others, I think is really, really important for elevating everyone's content and marketing programs overall.
Nice. Another great insight. Shifting gears a bit, the marketing leaders I've been talking with recently from hardware companies in particular are really taking a close look at the importance of building community as part of their overall marketing strategy and also growing their businesses. So what role does building community play in your marketing strategy?
I'm a huge fan of building a community, and I think it's both more simple and harder than people think at the same time. It's more simple in that sometimes it just takes putting yourself out there. You don't necessarily have to have this like super well moderated forum. I'd encourage people to maybe not do that. But the world we live in today is like, okay, social media is super present, and figuring out where your customers are on social and building like a brand voice and a trusted brand voice on these platforms is a great way to build community. And once you have community, it's easier to convert them into like your own database. I think there's always a risk where if you don't own the platform, those people, an algorithm could change and they're poof, they're gone. But that's also kind of the necessary evil we have to take on if we want to meet people where they are. So community is super important in terms of building that know, like, and trust factor where people know who you are, they like what you have to say, and they trust what you have to say. And if you're just shooting out an email saying, hey, download this white paper, that's not going to build a community. But if you're there active in the comments and you're doing social posts or forum, if you go the forum route, like being a good citizen of the watering holes that your customers are already a part of, I think is more important than trying to kind of build your own oasis way out in the desert somewhere where no one's ever going to get to. It's really easy to build the best oasis that the world has ever seen, but it's like in Antarctica, no one can get there, right? I see that all the time.
I feel like you've given us insights about this next question all along the way so far, but what advice would you give to aspiring marketers that actually want to work in the electrical engineering sector, or even those who have experience but want to kind of reinvent how they're approaching their craft?
I love that question. And I am always asking myself this too, is how do I get better at this? And how do I find new and interesting ways to reach these folks? And by these folks, I'm including myself. How do I, kind of keep myself interested in this and not be in the noise with the things I'm doing? I think there's two things. One of them is I see a lot of people afraid to put themselves out there. Not necessarily like, oh, I was going through this hard like mental struggle with depression, but more like here's a technical fact, and that there's a fear that if you put out technical facts, people are going to come back and correct you. They will come back and correct you sometimes, but that's okay as long as you handle it appropriately. Like, hey, you're right. We acknowledge we messed that one up. Own your mistakes, move on. People respect that. So a lot of people feel like they don't have the technical depth to start creating content and creating marketing programs and creating messaging. And I would say for a lot of what I do, sometimes I only know 5 or 10 or 20% more than what I've actually said. So you just have to know a little more than what you're saying to figure out what you're saying. You don't have to be necessarily a deep PhD expert in signal integrity to write about the importance of, backdrilling vias. Like, that's a thing you can write about effectively. And what makes you stand out there is not necessarily the technical information, but how you present it and what sort of story you put behind it, what sort of branding and messaging and value are you adding to that conversation, even if it's not this world-changing research paper on, via S parameters. The other advice I have for people who want to kind of maybe rebrand or upskill what they're doing is very similar to that, is if you're not starting it and not doing something, so say you maybe want to start a short form video program, or you want to start up-leveling your webinars, if you're not willing to kind of take a step and see what works, if you're just going to sit back and what is effective, you got to take some risks. And as you take these small bets, you're going to find some of the bets work, some of them don't, and you adjust and you iterate and you get better and better. And everyone I know who's really good at creating content and video started in a place where it was not good. Another side quest here, but go to your favorite like YouTube channel or YouTube creator or video creator and go to their video page and sort by oldest and watch the first videos that they did and then compare that to like their most recent video, night and day. Like we've all been there. That's just part of the journey, is putting yourself out there and getting better with time.
Another great insight, Dan. And I think that that's going to be a huge encouragement to a lot of marketers, whether newcomers or they have experience in the industry, to, step forward and start getting bold and experimenting more. As we round the last river bend here in our conversation, is there a way that people could get in touch with you if they wanted to talk more about an insight they've heard you share here, if they wanted to discuss potentially partnering with you on an idea for video content or anything related? How can they reach out?
LinkedIn is probably the best place at this point. Daniel Bogdanoff, which is a scary last name, but Bog like a swamp, Dan like my first name, and off like a light switch. That's a great place to reach out to me. I love geeking out on the technical marketing, technical content stuff. So yeah, I'd encourage people to reach out, and I'd love to just chat and see what I can learn from you, and see how we can both, kind of learn from each other through that conversation.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. I've learned a handful of things. I'm sure the community that sees this is going to also. And let's not have this be the last time we chat. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for being here, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute blast.